Hey there, music nerds. Steve Dawson here, and I'm just jumping in because in light of the passing of the great Duane Eddy, I've bundled up my two-part interview with him from 2016 in season 1 of the show and put it into one long episode here, and I am re-releasing it today so you can spend a bit of time here with the master of twang himself. If you're a listener, you'll know that usually I go through some of my guest history at the beginning of the show, but I will leave that to you to look up if you need a refresher. Needless to say, Duane wrote and recorded some of the most memorable guitar music of the 1950s, and it has endured and remained very influential through to today. I had a great visit with him that day in 2016. He came over to my studio with his wife, and she sat a few feet away playing Candy Crush on her iPad. And every time he was unsure of a name or a date, he'd look over at her and she'd look up from Candy Crush and correct him immediately with the right answer or fill in the blanks every time. And also before he showed up, he said he wasn't going to bring a guitar or play anything. And I never really expected him to do that. But as any self-respecting guitar nerd would, I conveniently placed an Epiphone Casino, which was the closest thing that I have to a Gretsch, that was his signature guitar, right next to where he would be seated during our conversation. Well, before he even sat down, he had that guitar in his hands. And, you know, that Epiphone unplugged and just acoustic in the room, it had that unmistakable twang sound of his that could only come from Duane Eddy. So we had a great conversation that went on for about 3.5 hours. And I originally chopped that down to about 2 hours and split it into 2 parts. So this is a combination of those 2 episodes. And I'm about to start releasing season 8 of the show in a week or so. So I hope you'll join me for future conversations. But for now, let's all enjoy this one with the incomparable guitarist and writer of some of the best-selling instrumental music of all time, not to mention an extremely nice man who is generous with his time and super nice to me, and I appreciated it so much, and you will hear that in this conversation here today. Enjoy my conversation with Duane Eddy.
Did I see that guitar, by the way? You know?
Thanks. Having you play it will give it some extra mojo.
Yeah. That's what I gave my guitar, my Gretsch one time. I took it out of the case and we were at a music store and here came Merle Travis. And
Yeah.
they introduced us and everything. I said, I got to show you my guitar. I figured maybe you'd teach it something, you know?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good when you play it.
That'll work fine if I need to demonstrate anything, you know.
Man. Feel
while
free.
we're talking.
All right.
You'll be able to hear this.
I'm sure. Oh, yeah. Just do that. I'll just sit here.
That's what I used to do when I was a kid.
So were you really into the Merle Travis stuff?
Yeah, Chet and Merle. Yeah.
Who was the bigger one for you?
I don't know. Probably Chet, I guess, because I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I could do a little Merle. I could play, you know. And Merle's a little funkier than.
Yeah.
I loved them both, but Chet was my man. I mean, he was the guy. But then I got to know him here in town and got to do the Grand Ole Opry in '96.
Oh, cool. With Chet.
With Chet.
Mm-hmm. That must have been pretty special.
Oh, that was a highlight for me because
really?
It was funny too. I mean, we went with both. Rusty Wilcoxon was producing the TV portion. It was a half-hour TV show, and on Saturday nights, and and we either did it out at the Opry Mills, is it?
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
The new Opry.
Yeah, or, wasn't out at the Ryman.
And Chet was on with Paul Yandell.
Uh-huh.
And Doyle Dykes was there.
Yeah.
I'd never met him or heard him before.
Uh-huh. What did you and Chet play that night? Do you remember?
Well, we did our own things, and then I did a couple of my songs. He did a couple of his with Paul, and Doyle came out and did a song, and then so we all did our thing, and then they came up to me and they said, "Oh, by the way, the managers want you guys to do something together," you know. So, and they're back in the dressing room talking it over now.
Oh, like the plan wasn't for you guys to play together at all?
No.
Oh, wow. That seems insane.
Last minute, they want you to do something, you know. Well, the tradition on the Opry is always to do a gospel song to close the show.
Yeah.
And I'd given it no thought because I wasn't going to play one, and I figured somebody would come out and do one.
Right.
But they said, no, they want you to do something together. And I said, then you better get back to the dressing room and find out what's going on. So I ran back there and went in the dressing room, and Chet looked up and he says, we decided to do I Saw the Light in the key of A. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, okay, fine. And he says, and I don't care how fast it is. And I thought, what's he trying to do, spook me? You know? I thought, well, I don't care either because he can do it.
Right, sure.
He can do a bluegrass tempo if he wants. All I have to go, you know.
You're happy.
And I don't know if he knew, you know, because a lot of people in town think of me as a pop artist, you know. They don't realize that I grew up on country.
But yeah, your early stuff is straight up country, like the first few singles that I've heard, the stuff that I've heard, before the instrumental stuff was like pretty straight up country, wasn't it?
Well, I did one track.
One single, yeah. That's the one I'm talking about. What, Soda
Fountain Girl. I was singing with Jimmy Dell. Yeah, Jimmy Dell.
That's like straight up old time country music.
Yeah,
right there.
That was first. Lee Hazel was first attempt at writing songs.
Okay.
Our first attempt at, we had just started singing together a year before. Mm-hmm. I didn't really consider myself a singer, but we had fun doing the Wilburn Brothers and the Delmore Brothers. And people like that. And
so was he a friend of yours that you were playing and singing with?
Yeah, we went to high school together.
Oh,
we were both in high school.
And you grew up in New York, or where?
No, I was born in Corning, New York, and then we moved out to different places, Bath and Branchport, Penn, up out of the Finger Lakes there.
Okay.
Around Lake Keuka. And
what state is that?
New York State.
Oh, in New York. Okay, like upstate.
Yeah, it's the western part.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful part of the country.
Okay.
Watkins Glen, you've heard of that?
Sure.
Well, that's at the bottom of Lake Seneca, which is the biggest of the Finger Lakes.
Okay.
And kind of right in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's at the southern tip of it. Well, I was in the next lake over, Lake Keuka, and we had a little country store at a crossroads 2 miles north of Branchport, which was just a 1.5 street. you know?
Yeah.
And actually a half a street with a crossroads. And
just a tiny little town.
Yeah, and we were 2 miles out in the country, and I had a little store up there. And
okay, so your parents were doing the general store?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We had a store and sold gas and and groceries and ice cream and things like that. You know, a lot of canned goods and fresh bread. The bread man would come. I guess about March or April they'd start running out of cash. You know, and so not all of them, but some did. And they said, "Can I bill that?"
Yeah, you guys ran a lot of credit.
He'd say, well, sure, I'll run you a tab. You know, so he'd do that for the next 3 months. And they'd come in and pay it all at once. And
the good old days.
my dad would resupply the store. And I went over the hill to Penn to school. And, so anyway, my dad got tired of the cold weather and shoveling snow, and he said, I want to go where it's warm, either Florida or Arizona. And I said, good Arizona, I want to see Indians and cowboys, you know?
Yeah.
Because I was 12. And
so, were you playing music yet? Or?
Oh, yeah, I played, I just taught myself guitar. And
did you hear it like on the radio and stuff, or were there jukeboxes around, or what was
I had a radio.
You did?
We had a radio, and I listened to that.
Yeah.
Anything country I could find. Listen to the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
Listen to WCKY in Cincinnati.
What kind of music were they playing on that station?
They play a lot of gospel late at night and bluegrass and country.
Okay.
And so I got a, Chuck Wagon Gang and people like that.
The Opry would be broadcast
on Saturday night, so I could hear that.
As far as that, okay.
And I heard Chet playing with Grandpa Jones, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been after I moved out to Tucson.
Okay.
But I remember. I can't do it. I'm really rough at it. But
it sounds fine to me.
Anyway, so
you ended up.
He got sick of shoveling snow and being cold. And
I'm from Canada, so I can relate.
We're in Canada.
Well, Vancouver, West Coast,
Western part,
so it's not that bad.
I played there once.
Oh yeah.
We were doing the Northwest, and
right.
I think I was on a tour at the time with James Brown.
Really? Oh,
yeah,
okay, so this is like
'59.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Well, so I'm a few years back here, and he still remembered it. And
really,
I saw his show, and I said to the promoters, I said, I'm doing instrumentals. He's singing and everything, and I could follow him. I could, because I had hits.
Right. Yeah.
There was no problem. But I thought, what a waste, Instrumentals shouldn't close a show, I didn't think.
Right.
Unless it's the only thing there.
So that's originally like you were, so it was
So I
James
swapped
Brown
right, and when they do it, I said, would you let him close and let me,
Yeah.
I'll set it up for him. And
James Brown's a tough act to follow too.
He is, but, he was, but not for me because I had my own group and I had the hits.
Yeah,
totally.
Totally.
And when you got hits, and he didn't have hits at the time. So he liked that. He appreciated that. And he said, what you doing, man? I said, well, I says, I can follow you, but I don't want to. I said, it's just, I did that with the big bus tours too. I'd always have Frankie Avalon or somebody or Fabian. They'd close it because they may not had many hits as I had, but and I was a headliner on a lot of those. But
it just felt awkward or something.
It felt better to be second to closing.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Have a singer close it,
Yeah. So on those tours, would you just go and play like 3 songs or 4 songs?
No, I got up to I did the first one. I started out in '58. I'd only do 2 or 3 songs on the Alan Freed shows at the Brooklyn Fox.
Yeah.
But as time went on, and a year or so later, I'd had more hits, and I got up to about 25 minutes, half hour.
Yeah.
But the headliner would only do 30 minutes. So.
Right. And there would be like 4 or 5 acts or something on that?
It'd be like 12 acts.
12 acts?
Yeah, we all rode the bus together. I mean, you could...
Wow. Was there any band sharing, or was it all individual
No, they
bands?
had an orchestra on another bus.
Okay.
I was the only one, myself and Bo Diddley.
Yeah.
That carried our own groups with us.
Wow. Okay.
Now, there was a guy that hard to follow was Bo Diddley.
Was it the full band? Like he had
Jerome
playing the maracas
Jerome
player
and his sister and
wicked.
And I think a drummer, and that was it. But I only had drums, bass, sax, and me. So it was
you toured with a sax player. Yeah. Okay. And so were you guys kind of co-headlining those tours? Did he have his hits at that point?
Bo was way at the bottom of the list. He'd go on quite a bit earlier. And I was second to last because by then I'd had enough hits that that's the way it worked,
Okay.
And somebody
it was like a hierarchy of
and somebody like Fats Domino or Jackie Wilson or Bill Haley or somebody like that would be the headliner, you know?
And Chuck Berry was on some of those too,
Chuck Berry, he's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he used to sit up all night and talk to the bus driver when we'd drive all night,
Yeah, yeah.
Rupert Moore was the bus driver, and Rupert would drive on through the night all night long, but Chuck would sit right up there next to the driver, or next to Rupe on the floor, because there's a step there. Because we just had an old secondhand Greyhound bus. It wasn't like the buses today.
It wasn't fancy.
With, stuff in them and TVs and sound and everything. It was just a bus with seats in a row. We'd have Chubby Checker, the Shirelles, Laverne Baker, Bobby Darin, the Everlys, myself, my group, and Dion and the Belmonts, and
Did you hang out much with like people like Chuck and Bo Diddley and
Oh
stuff?
yeah, I got a picture still today. It's kind of washed out, but Chuck was at the Brooklyn Fox. He had this Polaroid camera, and he had it on a tripod.
Yeah.
And he had a timer on it.
Oh yeah.
So he'd set it up, start the timer, and he'd have you stand over here.
Yeah.
Stand here, Duane. and then, okay. So then he'd set it all up, and then he'd run them back and stand beside me. And we'd smile at the camera, and it'd go poof, flash.
Yeah. And you still got it.
Yeah. Awesome. That one, because he wrote to the one guy who is for real.
Oh wow,
Chuck Berry.
Yeah. And, now he must have had a bunch of hits at that time, right?
Yeah, he did. He started in '56.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. With School Days,
Yeah, yeah. And
I used to love that stuff.
Did you guys play together on those shows at all, or there was no?
We jammed a couple of times upstairs in the Brooklyn Fox. He came in one day with his guitar, and I had mine there handy, and he.
Yeah. Was he an influence on you as well? Like maybe a later influence when you were developing your style?
He was in a way. I had to learn all those solos because we were a country band in Arizona when I started working when I was 15, and then. By the time I was 17, I got with the Sunset Riders there in Phoenix, and we did all covers of all the country hits, and did a TV show every week, and a Saturday night ballroom dance,
Yeah.
And then worked in smaller clubs during the week. So we were working constantly and doing all these songs.
So you knew all those tunes.
And when the rock and roll came along, it fit right in with country.
Yeah, sure. It's hardly any different at that point.
Yeah, Johnny B. Good, it was just. Not that came first, but we did Maybelline.
Yeah.
Things like that, and the singer would sing it. We did all those, and we did Everly Brothers in '57 by the time they came along.
Yeah.
And I did Elvis, of course. I had to do
So this
Don't
is
Be
like,
Cruel. Remember that? Don't
of
Be
course.
Cruel, and Hound Dog. The same things all, but we were also doing Marty Robbins, Ernest Tubb, and
right, like it was hardly any different, almost really. I mean, there was a
Farron Young and George Jones, and Webb Pierce,
stuff.
of course.
So this was a band you were playing with around the Arizona area, or were you touring
Buddy Long
nationally?
was the singer, and I was the guitar player, and Buddy Wheeler was a steel player, and Jimmy Dell, who I had sung with before. He'd come in once in a while and sit in and play piano.
How often were you playing gigs with that band? All the time?
Oh yeah, we had
playing dances and
we had
and...
like I said, the ballroom type things on Saturday night, and then clubs all the other 6 nights or 5 nights, whatever. Sometimes we didn't work on Mondays or Sundays, but the other nights we worked at smaller clubs. And
the sound that you eventually developed was kind of, as I understand it, in conjunction with Lee Hazelwood, who you worked with a lot on those early instrumental records.
He produced the records.
Yeah,
he didn't come up with my sound. He
produced the records. So
he did come up with the sound on every other instrument, because what he did, he was a disc jockey.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he started out. That's where I met him, in Coolidge, Arizona, where I was going to high school, and I was 15.
Yeah.
Jimmy and I were singing together at the time, just school dances and the Armory and places like that. And I also worked with a little 4-piece country band. They just did strictly hardcore country, which was fine because I knew that stuff.
You could do it.
When I went to work the first night when I was 15 at the VFW, I didn't know if I could even play with them.
Really?
So I said, "What do you do?" You know? And he says, "Oh, we do the songs like Your Cheating Heart and Slipping Around." And I said, "Oh, I know all those."
Yeah. Sure.
And so it was no problem, And, remember that, Ernest Tubb?
Yeah, totally. with that band, there would be a steel player, a singer.
No, I had drums, bass, and rhythm. That was it.
Okay.
And the rhythm guy also sang.
Okay.
Johnny Griffith, his name was. And
would Lee Hazelwood have heard you?
No, he didn't hear that,
band?
but he heard Jimmy and I. And what happened was another guy that used to come sit in, play rhythm with Jimmy and I at his house, at Jimmy's house, because that's where the piano was. And
okay.
So we went to his house to play, and his brother Bill played banjo. So the four of us, and this guy Ed Myers played a little rhythm guitar, so he'd come and, for the fun of it, sit in. He wanted to be a DJ, so he was always hanging around the radio station. So, and the way they found out was a guy named Jim Doyle was the DJ, and my dad was in the local radio station there in Coolidge. My dad had been promoted. He got his own store. He was worked for Safeway, and he managed the store, Safeway store in Coolidge.
Oh, okay.
So that's how we got there.
So he would advertise on the radio station or something?
No, just a DJ come in one day. And,
oh, I see. Okay.
You know how parents do.
Yeah.
My son plays guitar.
Right.
So we'll bring him out to the station sometime, and we'll put something on tape and see what it sounds like. So
okay.
I went out and I played a Chet Atkins song.
Just by yourself?
Yeah, just by myself.
Yeah.
And Jim Doyle played it early in the morning, the farm report.
So they recorded it. They had a tape machine.
They had a tape machine.
Okay.
Just a mic and a tape. And I played it on there. And he played it on the farm report. And then Jimmy came running up to me at school. And then
really?
After school, Johnny Griffith called and said, "You want to work Saturday night?" And,
no way.
Yeah, so that all started the whole thing. And then Jim Doyle went on to a bigger market.
He left the station
a couple months later. And here came Lee Hazelwood, and his out of broadcasting school, Columbia Broadcasting School, and it was his first gig as a DJ.
And he had
because they like to place people, you know.
Right.
So they sent him to Coolidge. It was an opening.
Okay. So
that's how he got there, and he says, "You got to come out and meet this guy. He's a real character." Lee did two voices. He did X Preston, which was an old man.
Okay.
And then he did his own young man thing, and he used to talk to himself, tell awesome. Jokes, you know.
Right, yeah.
You know, why the rooster cross the street, you know, to get to the other side? And, you know, I mean, whatever. And
so they'd have like a online or like a on-air personality thing going on, and then they'd spin songs.
Yeah, and then he played country records in between from like 7 to 10 at night, and then they shut the station down. We went out there one night and I met him, and then he
didn't have recordings at this time?
No.
Okay.
Just that one tape,
right.
Which they recorded over because they needed the tape for a commercial.
No way. Damn.
So I don't have a copy of that. I wish I did.
Maybe it'll get unearthed one of these days. Maybe
no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So how did Lee get to know your music just from coming out to see you guys?
So he'd come out and see us play, and he wanted to get out of there. You know, I mean, he wanted to get into a bigger market too.
Okay, right.
So he wanted to go to Phoenix.
Okay.
Which is 60 miles away from Coolidge.
Yeah.
And Coolidge is halfway between Tucson and Phoenix.
Uh-huh.
So there was a guy named Ray Odom that used to book shows at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty presumptuous name for a place in Phoenix.
Oh, that was like a small place in Phoenix. No way.
It was a wrestling place like the real Madison Square Garden, so they called it that. And Ray would book it on Saturday nights and fill the place up with chairs, and he'd book country acts like George Jones, Webb Pierce, Sonny James, Hank Lachlan, Maddox Brothers, and Rose. And
would you go to those concerts, or
I would? Jimmy and I would go. We'd be part of the local talent. He'd open up with local talent.
Okay.
There's about 6 or 8 singers around town, and the band would back us up.
Yeah.
And
you must have met a lot of great musicians that way, like in George Jones's band and stuff like that.
No, no, we didn't hang with them.
Really?
They come in, do their show, and they're gone.
Okay.
Yeah. But we did see Bud Isaacs down at Sarge's Cowtown, which was a honky tonk in South Phoenix, and where one of the local bands played. He'd come in, and apparently Buddy Emmons came in and sat in with him, but I missed that somehow. And
but he wasn't in George Jones's band at that time?
I don't think so. If he was, I didn't know. I backed up. We backed him one night. They had a show out at Abel Hall, which was not Madison Square Garden, but it was another Union Hall farther out in the West End.
Okay.
And they had a big package show came through, and it was like a pickup date,
Right.
between, I don't know, say Albuquerque and L.A. or something.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, we got a free night, we'll pick it up and do it. And Ray got it cheap and made some money, but their bands had all bust on ahead, so we had to back them, and which was fine. I got to play George Jones, I got to play back.
Did he really?
Play guitar, yeah.
Wow, no kidding.
Got Do You Want to Be My Baby?
What year would that have been? Do you remember? This is still before you were making records, obviously.
Oh, yeah, it's about 56, I think.
Okay.
It would have been 56. Wanda Jackson was there, Ernest Tubb.
Yeah.
Now, Ernest had a couple guys with him, but I don't know if it was Buddy. I don't think so. Who else? Jimmy Dickens, Mel Tillis.
Yeah, yeah.
And like Wanda Jackson says, well, I got this new song I'm doing, and it was the first part it was a ballad, and then I Want to Know. And she'd sing, and then it'd break and it'd go.
Right.
And then she'd rock it out.
Yeah.
So she says, we'll just do the slow part, because she didn't figure anybody knew it.
Right.
So she did the first part, and I kicked in. And she turned around and said, oh, they know it. Oh, great. I asked her about that, but she didn't remember after 55, 60 years.
Really? Yeah.
I don't know why. I do.
Yeah,
but
man. That would be ingrained in your
Anyway,
in your memory,
who did remember is Mel Tillis. He remembered meeting me for some reason.
Really?
Yeah. Because what happened, Lubin Brothers were there with Paul Yandell. And we went to an after-hours club afterward. Everybody wanted to drink, and there was no place to get one, so they had this little dump over on the corner of Grand and 35th or something, and 27th and Grand Avenue, and just a little bar, Yeah, but it had a stage. They'd have a couple of guys go up there and sing on some nights, and so we all piled in there, and we got to go with them. And George got up and sang, "Don't stop." Don't stop the music. Let it play one more time.
Right, this is just like an after hours, like a
and he just did it with his guitar, And Ernest Tubb said, "Sing that one about the broken jukebox." He said, "It keeps going," and so George did. Don't stop the music. Oh, it was great. And little Jimmy Dickens was there, and he's just wisecracking.
I bet. And you knew all these guys' records?
Oh, God, yeah.
From
everything they did, sure.
Right.
That's all we did was listen to the radio and play their hits. And we did an hour TV show called the Hillbilly Hit Parade on Saturday afternoons on ABC.
Yeah.
And we did all the top 10.
Right.
Which never changed for months. So we'd intersperse them with old favorites and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And,
so were you kind of starstruck, like those guys roll into town, and you're just?
Well, I was watching them like a hawk, and of course I loved George. But I didn't say a word to him.
Really?
And no, and the Lubins got up and played, and what's his name?
Was Chet playing with them?
No, Paul Yandell.
Okay.
He plays a lot like Chet, and he plays with Chet, or he did.
Because he's on a lot of their records, Chet is. Yeah.
Well, Paul did a lot of those records.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah. He did all those things you think are Chet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like
yeah. That's all Paul Yandell.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I had to
like
learn
Chet.
that solo. I could play it better than that back then, but I still remember him, And
so how did that lead to recording with Lee?
oh well, Lee 1956, he wrote a song, and I said, Lee, he sang it for me,
Yeah.
I said, you should record that. He said, no, I don't want to record it. He said, I don't sing that good. He says, I just want to be in the background,
Yeah.
Anyway, he found this kid named Sanford Clark to sing the song. It was called The Fool.
Okay.
And it got to be number 8 in the top 10.
That song's
They
called
put
The
it on
Fool?
a low, in 1956. They put it on a local label, and then Randy Wood at Dot Records in Hollywood picked it up. He heard it, and he leased it from him, and then it became he distributed it nationwide. It became a big number 8 hit in Billboard. And so Dot also gave Lee a job as a producer.
Okay.
So that was the end of his DJing days.
I bet.
But the 2 years before that he'd been a DJ, he spent all the time, he worked the country shows, but he also, when he got to Phoenix, he got a job in Mesa, KTYM, which is a pop station.
Yeah.
And they were playing Pat Boone and Elvis and whoever was, it was 56, 55, late 55.
The hits of the day.
The
hits of the day.
Hits of the day. And what he did, smart little guy that he was, he sat there and he'd memorize those sounds. He'd hear the bass because he had good equipment in a radio station,
Sure,
good speakers. He'd hear the bass on a Pat Boone record or a Fats Domino record, and he'd memorize how it sounded. And the drum sounds on these different records.
And he had some technical. You said he went to a technical.
Well, that
school
was
or something?
to learn how to be a DJ.
Okay.
A disc jockey.
Okay, so he didn't have engineering skills.
No, he didn't have engineering thing, but he did. He just, And so when he started recording, he just knew what he wanted to get, and he just kept after the engineer till he got it.
Okay.
Jack Miller was he wasn't on The Fool, but later on with my stuff, Jack would try to fight to interpret what Lee was trying to say,
Right.
And in other words, the EQ instead of today, the guys say, up about 450, can you add a little bit there?
Yeah.
But we'd say, can you put a little more highs on it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And can you make it a little
the gear was a lot less
sounding?
specific in those days too. It was more
needs to be a little meatier down there.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of boardy there. That was one.
It's actually a better way to communicate, I think.
Yeah. Well, we got the idea across, and Jack would figure it out, and they'd work on it all day. It would take us all day to do a song.
So what was your first studio experience then? Was it the Soda Fountain Girl single?
Yeah, that was the first one.
That was the first time.
Yeah, nothing came of that. But
and did Lee produce that song, or was
he wrote them and produced.
Oh, he wrote that song.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, that was his first attempt at writing a song.
Okay.
It was a first for everybody.
Right. And then
that was early 55.
And then you did Movin' and Groovin' with him, right?
Yeah, that was 58. 57 actually. Late 57, Raunchy became a hit.
Oh, Raunchy was before that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was like September, October, November of 57.
Okay.
Raunchy got to be a hit by Bill Justice and Ernie Freeman. Ernie Freeman had the West Coast version hit, and Bill Justice had the East Coast.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, most of the stations east of the Mississippi played Bill Justice. Most of them west of the Mississippi played
Was
Ernie
it a similar
Freeman.
version?
Huh?
Was it a similar version?
But yeah, Ernie just covered the arrangement. And
really?
And they both records were in the top 10 at the same time.
That's crazy.
One was 6 and one was 8, and then maybe 7 and 9 and 2 and 4 and 2 and 6, and they just go up and down. And you can check on a Billboard. It's I don't know exactly the numbers, but they were both in the top 10.
Okay.
I didn't know that at the time. It surprised me when I looked it up.
Right.
And so Lee said, maybe we ought to do an instrumental. Well, he had not gotten anything after Sanford. Dot Records, they kept him about 6 months, and then they let him go because he didn't get anything. Any more chart records or anything.
Oh, okay.
He was producing like crazy, but he didn't over in Hollywood. But so he came back to Phoenix figuring, well, my luck was good there before. Maybe I'll find somebody. So he started producing anybody that could carry a tune and breathe. And but all my friends were signed up, so I was the only one that was free and
So whose idea was it to record an instrumental?
On the side, well, because Raunchy, Lee and I were talking. We were still, hanging out all the time.
Yeah.
And he says, maybe we ought to, He says, Raunchy's doing good. And he says, maybe we ought to cut an instrumental. And I says, yeah, I think that'd be good. I'm up for that,
Yeah.
He says, well, go home and write something. So I went home and I had these 2 licks. I had the, and then I had a thing that I liked. It was a little different. So I decided just to put them. Anyway, that was...
So you brought that to him and he was...
So I showed it to him. He said, okay, let's cut it. So we did, and we worked up another... That was the other side. It was very unexciting. He kind of put that together with another guitar player there. And,
because to me, like when I hear that song, it seems fully formed. Like the concept was there for this whole like twangy sound that nobody else was really doing at the time.
Well, I was trying. I didn't know what to do. To tell you the truth. To be honest, I thought, should I play up high, but or down low?
Yeah. So you did a bit of both.
Because in those days, every rock and roll record they do.
Right.
Yeah. And Chuck was doing what Chuck did, and I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe if I get down in the
lower regions.
In the weeds, I can do, And then so I thought, well, I got the high lick, and then I got the low lick, and that worked okay. So. I almost was scared to put them together and do it. They did it, and then when we overdubbed the sax in L.A., in Hollywood, we put
that was an after.
Johnson.
That was an overdub.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And we only had 3 tracks, so.
Did you have? Was that the intention to have a sax feature in there? Okay.
Yeah. It was rock and roll,
But you didn't have a guy in Phoenix that would do it.
No, we didn't have a good sax player.
Okay.
I mean, we had. Horn players, but they were, like old school from the 40s and like that,
the LA guys
jazz players or something. They didn't have any rock and roll sound like King Curtis or Plas Johnson or Gil Bernal or any of those guys.
Yeah.
And so Lee took it to Gold Star Studios there in Santa Monica, and they had the best echo in the world.
Right.
Echo chamber, and then we had our own version of echo with the water tank.
Yeah, which I need to talk to you about. But so you did the main track in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Okay, and what studio was that?
Ramsey's.
Okay.
On North 7th, and that's where I did everything from.
Okay. Why didn't you just go to Hollywood to do the tracks?
That cost money. I didn't have any money. He didn't have any money.
Okay.
He was getting that studio for practically nothing, know.
Yeah.
I don't know, $1 a day, maybe. I don't know. No, he was probably paying $10 an hour to, and he was using his own money.
Yeah.
And he paid the guy's session scale, which was 41 and a quarter.
41 and a quarter.
$41.25. That was scale.
Okay.
All right. So, of course, I was the artist. He didn't have to pay me. But
right.
That's what he paid 2 or 3 of them anyway.
Okay. Now, what do you remember about that session, like from your part of it, when you guys recorded the guitar and bass and drums? Was it? Oh,
we just sat there and worked at it, and until Lee got the sound that he wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew what sound he wanted on everybody except me. And then I provided that for him. So.
Yeah. And so were you playing like a Gretsch or something back then? What was your?
Yeah, I had my 57 Gretsch.
Okay.
I just bought it earlier that year.
Yeah, and it had a Bigsby and the whole...
And the Bigsby.
Yeah.
Had the sweetest neck you ever seen on a guitar. And about half the size of this one.
Okay.
No, it's just thinner. And, and smaller shoulders on it. And it just was a dream neck.
Okay.
You know?
What about an amp? What kind of amp were you playing through?
Well, there I had a Magnetone amp, and Buddy Wheeler, a steel player in town, that worked with us, and Dick Wilson, a jazz guitar player who was a friend of Buddy's.
Yeah.
They wanted, Buddy being a steel player, wanted something more clear and
with some more
powerful,
headroom,
you know?
and
A little more headroom. So they took a Magnetone and they put a 100-watt power plant in it.
Whoa, that's a lot of power.
Yeah, well, that's what they did. And then they put a JBL, Jim Lansing speaker, D130, and a tweeter.
Oh, really?
And a spring echo system in it.
Right. That was similar to the Fender, or was it's sort of its own thing?
Oh, yeah, it was just laid on the bottom of the amp, I suppose. I don't know. They're all the same, I think.
Yeah.
And if you drop the amp and it's plugged in, if it's on, it makes a big...
So how much of that echo sound came from the amp as opposed to the...
No, I turned the echo off on the amp.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And a lot of the highs on the guitar, so he could mess with the EQ in the
console.
booth.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I had it pretty good out there.
So you had this 100-watt amp that you were playing through?
Yeah, it was the best amp in the country. I've discovered later the Standell amps were supposed to be the best. Yeah. Well, about a year after that, another thing they did, they covered it with black Naugahyde and with a white grill cloth, so it looked sharp, too.
Oh, it looked cool, right.
It looked better than that old tan Magnetone. So, and they charged $100 to do that, so...
Okay, so this was
saved up my $100 and gave them my Magnetone, and they brought it back sounding like that. So in about the same time I got that Gretsch guitar,
you were off the races.
I had my outfit then. Yeah. So when we recorded, that's what I used, and I used it from then on. A year later, I got to at Manny's in New York, a music store there in New York City. I took it in, and we A-B'd it with a Standell, which was supposed to be the top of the line, the best amp you could buy in America.
Yeah.
Or in the world.
And it ate it for lunch.
Ate it for lunch. I mean, I hit the same note, you know, like that, and on the Standell, you turn it up, it'd break up eventually.
Yeah.
I'd turn mine up, hit it, nothing, just as clear as a bell, no breakup, and I'd turn it up farther and do it, and no breakup, and just...
So that must have been painfully loud then, if it was like, was it a 100-watt amp that you were cranking up to?
Yeah, my ears would be ringing on Sunday morning after Saturday night at Abel Hall. It was it was, you know, but we played in, after I had hits, we played in places like Maple Leaf Gardens and, you know, big coliseums and things, and they didn't have the sound systems then. They'd mic the piano.
Right.
And
so your amp wouldn't even be mic'd in a situation like that.
No.
Back then. Wow.
They mic'd the
so you needed 100 watts.
They mic'd the sax.
Yeah.
But the bass amp and me and the drums were not mic'd.
No kidding.
And we balanced ourselves, and they could still hear us. And
wow, that's crazy. So for the sound on that first single, was that echo chamber already built in the studio, or? Yeah,
we did that earlier in the year. Floyd, who owned Ramsey's.
Okay.
Floyd Ramsey.
Yeah.
That's Ramsey's studio, and Jack Miller, the engineer, and then they had a 3-track Ampex machine. And
3-track being like center, left, right? Is that what a 3-track was all about?
No, it was just 3 tracks.
3 tracks. Weird.
Yeah, Ampeg. Later, they bought, after I had Rebel Rouser, they bought a 4-track.
Okay.
And Jack said, "Look at this." And he played something we just recorded, and he could pan it across. He says, "We can do stereo now."
Oh, so the 3-track you couldn't...
2 tracks on each side, but with 3 tracks you couldn't do that.
You couldn't do any panning. It was just all mono.
Just mono, period.
Okay.
And Lee would have to mix the band on 1 track.
Yep.
Leave 1 track open, or have me on 1 track. and sometimes it fed in, but that was okay. But I was pretty isolated, so you could work with me against the track.
Yeah.
And then we had to have the voices and the sax. And we had one track left for them.
Okay.
And he'd mix them when he was overdubbing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had the Sharps, so Thurston Harris and the Sharps. But at Thurston wasn't there, but the Sharps were. They had a song called Little Bitty Pretty One. Anyway, the Sharps became friends, and I did a 1-week show in L.A.
Yeah.
Rock and roll show after Moving and Grooving. And just went out and played that one song all week long.
Moving and Grooving. So that was how big of a hit was that song?
That just got in the 70s.
Okay.
And with an anchor.
Right.
No bullets.
But for an instrumental, there couldn't have been that many instrumentals on the charts, right?
Two, Raunchy and Hold It. I mean, 3. Honky Tonk with Bill Doggett in 56. Right. He followed up with Hold It.
Yeah.
Did fairly well, not as big a hit, but
okay.
It was still charted. And then Raunchy.
Right.
And then here came Moving and Grooving. Well, that only did that much, but that was enough to say, well, go back and do something else.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
58 years ago next week, we went into the studio and cut Rebel Rouser.
And was that done similarly in the studio in Phoenix?
Yeah.
Okay. Same place.
Yeah, I went in that morning and wrote it, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I just said, Bob Taylor, the drummer, cowboy drummer, from the Honky Tonks. And
was it the same crew that played on
same one.
Moving and Grooving? Okay, yeah.
I said, just play me an afterbeat. And I just... And he went, well, we got... And then I thought, well, what do I do now? Do I make a bridge,
Yeah.
I mean, something like that. I didn't like that, so...
So how does that even happen? You went into the studio with no song?
No thought, no idea.
Was the intention to write something?
Or Lee said, he got anything? I said, not yet. I said, so I just started fooling around, I had to sign. I don't know where it came from, out of my head somewhere. And I also had a vision.
Did you feel like this is it? This is the song, or was there a lot
of? I wanted to kind of make like a rock and roll thing,
Yeah.
And my country influence was coming through too. And but what I wanted to, I had a picture. Also doing that rock and roll show with that one song, it took they to say, here he is, Duane Eddy, and I'd run out and plug in and start playing. Mm-hmm. By the time I was ready to play, all the applause had died down.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I need something where I can plug in with a long cord.
Yeah.
And then while they're still applauding, I can start playing. So I just played just by myself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No beat.
And I thought by the time I get out there, I'll be
halfway through it.
Yeah. Then the band can kick in.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So it was like a showbiz decision.
Yeah. The melody, the kind of thing I had going in my brain was like a gang coming down an alleyway toward me, like 4 or 5 guys with their chains and their knives and stuff,
Yeah.
Like what was that movie, West Side Story? Yeah. I kind of pictured a gang like that coming at me.
That's actually interesting because it's always...
That was my mental image of... and then somehow that...
I've always pictured that being like a soundtracky kind of thing.
Yeah, it all translated into that.
Yeah.
And then we thought, well, what do we do now? So I played it a couple, 3 times, and then I know. I know what I can do. Modulate.
Yeah, let's change keys.
And then we got up and then we had the sax solo. We left that for that. And then we did the last 3 in G. So and faded out. And then they had the Sharps come in and they did the hand claps and the
Okay. So that was overdubbed after the fact.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Gil Bernal did the honking sax.
Mm-hmm.
He played in a lot of.
He was an LA guy as well?
Yeah, he was an LA guy. He played with Spike Jones and different people.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Yeah.
But he also played on the Coasters record of Searching.
Oh.
And he was really funky. So he used to play in strip joints.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll build up your embouchure.
Yeah, and it did. And so when he got on Rebel Rouser, he just honked at his.
Were you there for the sax overdubs?
No,
okay.
They did all that.
And when it came back, were you happy with?
When it came back, I was stunned and amazed because we had echo when it left.
Yeah,
the track did, but didn't have the sax, didn't have the voices.
Right.
And then also their hand clapping and everything.
Yeah, it adds a lot.
And then when it got up there, the sax and stuff, they started yelling. You know, hey, whoop, you know, yelling, play that thing, and you know, and he had to duck them a couple of times. And I mean, they just got with it, and they did it as a joke first time, and Lee says, "No, leave that in."
Yeah,
really, you want us to do? Yeah. So when the record came back, I listened to it about 6 times before I could absorb it, you know, because he'd also added that Gold Star echo, which blended with our old water tank echo, which was a little tinny.
Yeah.
But it worked.
The Gold Star echo would have been a chamber.
Yeah, it was a big underground chamber.
Okay, yeah. Did he mix it in LA too, or did he bring it? Okay. So it came back fully.
Yeah, when he sent the acetate back to me, that's all we had in those days.
Right.
Called them dubs.
Yeah.
He sent a dub to me.
Yeah.
Of a finished product.
And could you listen to that at home, or did you have to go into the studio to hear it?
No, it was a 45. Yeah. And I just put it on my little record player I had. That's all I had.
Yeah.
Didn't have any sound system.
Yeah.
And
did you think, this is going to be awesome, man?
No, I just listened to it and I thought, my Lord, is that the same record, you know? And,
really? Yeah.
And it's the same record. My gosh, but I would have never thought of that, you know? And it just rocked. It just
it sure did.
Of those ingredients that he added, just really was the frosting on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
Years later, in fact, just not too long ago, a few years before he died.
Lee, you're talking about?
Lee, yeah. My producer and the co-writer.
Yeah.
And he didn't have anything to do with writing the song. And he said so. He said, I probably shouldn't have taken half of your song. You know?
Oh, so were those all like Duane Eddy / Lee Hazelwood compositions? Though
we decided to split everything.
Okay.
The B-side was Stocking, and he kind of came up with the idea for that.
Yeah.
I finished writing it, but...
So you just said, we'll just split everything right down the middle.
Yeah, he wanted to split everything, and I said, well, that's not fair. You did more on Stocking, and I did more on Rebel Rouser. That's just...
Yeah.
You write Stocking, I'll write Rebel Rouser. No, I want to split it. He wanted to split everything.
Yeah.
He said, I want to build up my BMI. I says...
Well, it's simpler that way.
In those days, it was a half a cent. I mean, it was a penny.
Right.
If you wrote Rebel Rouse, if I wrote it all myself, I'd have got a penny because the publishing is a penny and the song was a penny as far as sales go. So I got half a penny. What's half a penny? Who cares? What's a penny? Who cares? I didn't know they'd add up to tens of thousands of dollars.
That's a lot of pennies.
Yeah. But he did know, and so he kind of took advantage. But he
was there ill will about that? Like, did
no.
You were okay with it? I mean, those are decisions that you just kind of make at the time.
It was a penny, and
right.
And they had the publishing anyway, so
yeah. So what happened with that record? Was it like you didn't have a label at that point, or did you?
No, we had a record label. Lee had a partner named Lester Sill. And on all the albums, you'll see produced by Lester Sill and Lee Hazelwood. Mm-hmm. Well, Lee actually did the producing, but Lester did the business.
Okay.
And he knew these people back in Philadelphia that had a little label called Jamie Records.
Right.
So that's what they were actually a distribution company.
Yeah.
So they put it out on that Jamie
Records. Yeah.
And that got up in the 70s, and they said, go back and do something else. So we went back and I did Rebel Rouser, and then they put that out in about April, the end of April of 58.
Right.
And it was the big record of the summer. I think it did somewhere around 3 million numbers.
No way, that's crazy. Yeah. That must have been the biggest selling instrumental.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
By far.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I'll never get another one, but I went on Dick Clark's show, and
the record goes huge. What happened to you as far as like, were you immediately drawing way bigger crowds at shows?
No. What I did was I went back to Philadelphia, took a little band with me. It took Steve Douglas on sax and a bass player and a drummer, and who both got homesick and went home. And I had my group then.
Yeah.
And but I went to Philadelphia and did all this promotion and did Dick Clark's show and a couple record hops for him. And he said, would you like to come down to Miami and do my remote? And
was Dick Clark doing a TV show at this point, or was it a radio?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, TV. He was on every afternoon. That's right. I forget people don't know this.
Every afternoon?
Every afternoon. For 2 hours, he had a dance party.
2 hours.
He played records, and the kids from Philadelphia there, from the surrounding school districts, you know, that were between 15 and 18.
Yeah.
They'd about 50 of them, 30 of them would come down to the studio.
Yeah.
It looked huge, but on TV, but it actually wasn't. So he'd play these records and host it, and I'd do commercials, and
the kids would dance, and that was the show.
And the kids would dance to the records. Yeah. And then he'd have them rate them, and I give it an 89 because it's what it used to say.
Has a good beat.
Has a good beat, and it's easy to dance to.
Well, yeah. What else do you need, really?
And
but that was pre-American Bandstand.
That was American Bandstand.
Oh, that was American Bandstand. That was on every day.
Every day, wow, Monday through
crazy.
Friday.
I had no idea.
I used to sit there in my little shack I lived in at the time. And watch it on TV. Never dreaming I'd be on it.
Right. And then there you were. And you were on it a lot, right?
We'd watch that, and then we'd watch the Mickey Mouse Club because I like to see Annette.
Annette.
And it was, something to do in the afternoon.
Right.
I'd eat and get ready and go to work,
Would you fly up there to do that show? Because you did it a lot, right?
We drove back to Philadelphia, and we stayed there for several weeks, and I drove up and down the East Coast with Harry Finfer, who was the promotion man.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out he was one of the best in the country.
Dropping in on radio stations and stuff like that?
Yeah, going to radio stations, interviews, and then did the afternoon bandstand where we mimed the record.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because you can't do live sound on TV.
Right.
In those days, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Although I did, but one time after that. But,
did you like doing things like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't mind miming it. It was easy to do.
Right.
And left me free to act like an idiot, and every time you moved, the girls would scream. And, so it was, it was fun to do. And the record hops, of course, we did live. That's why I had the group with me.
Okay.
We only had moving and grooving to do, and
what all did you play on those?
Well, at first I just did moving and grooving.
Just one song.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had written, or a friend of mine had written another song called Ramrod, and then of course Rebel Rouser by this time. So on the record hops, I do moving and grooving and Rebel Rouser.
Okay.
And because Ramrod wasn't finished yet.
Right.
And so he said, "You want to come down to Miami? I'm doing a remote down there and doing a live thing for a Saturday night show." Now, the Saturday night show, besides the bandstand, he had the Saturday night Beach Nut show, which was a half hour of all, it wasn't just playing records. The artists would all be there to mime the records.
Okay.
So he'd introduce Sam Cooke, and he'd do You Send Me, and then next he'd have Bobby Darin doing Splish Splash.
And this is Dick Clark again?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was doing all the emceeing.
Right.
I mean, we had, what were our numbers last night? I think somewhere between 61, 62 million.
That's insane.
Which it is insane today. But in those days, that was just, there was still a few million to go. But we're watching other things.
Yeah.
But one of the other two stations, it was only ABC, NBC, and CBS.
Right.
plus some local stations, in towns and some bigger cities like LA and so forth.
So that was a great way to reach just like a massive audience.
You did, yeah.
And did that record, like, did it gradually become huge, or was it like out of the gate it was massive?
No, what happened, well, the first thing that happened is everybody liked Stalkin', which was the B-side.
Oh.
Dick Clark liked it. My producer, Lee, liked it.
Better than
the record company liked it. Yeah, and it was... It was a blues.
A slow, greasy one.
Yeah. No. That was all it was. And so, I mean, we had sax and piano and stuff. It was funky, and the sharps were going, It was real, I'm not ashamed of the record. I'm pleased with the record. I was pleased with it, but I knew it wasn't a hit.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand why they all loved it so much.
That was the B-side.
That was the B-side. And so about 2 weeks after it came out, Lee called me and says, well, it looks like you're going to have a short career. I said, well, you're just full of good cheer, aren't you? And he says, Stalkin's just not making it. He says, everybody thought it would, but...
Why were they pushing the B-side first?
Well, that was the A-side.
Oh, originally?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Rebel Rouser was the B-side. I don't know why, because everybody, these myths they have in the record business, you can't start your first record being a ballad.
Right.
And this is what they told me when I produced Phil Everly and wanted to put this song out, that it was a ballad. And they said, well, you can't start with a ballad. I says, with an Everly brother? Are you kidding me? But so back to Stalkin'. It died a death, and fate intervened. I found out a year or so later. And I said, can't you get him to turn it over? And he says, no. He says, I've tried. He says, Harry's tried. Everybody else has tried. And everybody tried. Nobody can do it. Dick Clark, he says, I don't want to waste time, And I said, well, gee, I wish there was somebody that I could call and have them try it,
Yeah.
Well, Monday came. What do you know? Dick Clark played it. And Lee calls up, says, well, I got him to turn it over. I said, did you? He says, I did. I said, well, God bless you. Thank you. I think we'll see some results. And Harry Fincher called, well, I got him to turn it over.
So you knew, you were just like, man, we just got to get them to play that B-side. And it'll be.
I said, if there's a side, that has to be it.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Maybe neither side would work. But if either one did, that
was going to be
that would be the one.
Yeah.
And I think what scared him was the long intro. And
of Rebel Rouser.
Yeah. Harry called. He says, well, I got Dick to turn it over. I thought, oh, you got it? And Lee called, and he said he got him to turn it over. Everybody took credit for it.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I found out a couple of years later, I said, Dick liked me to, he became good friends, and he liked to hang with me and have me ride with him on the plane, instead of the bus, on the bus tours.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, once in a while. If it was convenient and everything, if he was not going on ahead. And we're sitting there next to each other and we're talking about, because he could confide in me, and if he said it was confidential, I'd forget it, and I couldn't tell you today what they all was.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's the way I am. I just don't remember. If it's confidential, I don't want to remember.
It's gone.
Yeah, gone. So he's talking about something, and then it was quiet for a while, and he said, did I ever tell you how I happened to turn the Rebel Stalkin' over? And I said, no. And thinking, I guess you did it because Lee and Harry and everybody asked you to.
Yeah.
He said, it was the weirdest thing. He says, I do these record hops on Friday nights. And he said, I think I'd gone to Allentown that weekend, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It's a couple hours drive out of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd book a hall, and he'd take his sound equipment, play records on big speakers,
Okay.
and charge $1.50, and the kids would come in and dance to the records he
Right.
played.
Yeah.
And he'd take 3 boxes of single, one's for each hour.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this Friday night, he said, I went to get the 3rd box, and it wasn't there. And he said, oh, gosh, I remember I set it on the shelf. I forgot it. It's still back in my garage at home.
So the 3rd set was all the B-sides.
Yeah, so he said he had 3 boxes of hits.
Yeah.
So he says, he told the kids, I forgot a box of records, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to some B-sides.
Yeah.
So luckily, I was in one of the boxes he'd brought with him, and he'd play Stalkin'.
Yeah.
So the 3rd hour, he turned it over and played
Sure.
Rebel Rouser. He said, kids milled around for a minute while the intro was going. He says, but then when the band kicked in, he said they started dancing.
Okay.
And he says, they rushed up at the end of the song. Could you please play that again? Please,
Really?
please play it again.
Yeah.
So he says, okay. So he said, all right, we've had tons of requests to play it again. So here we go. And they played it a second time.
It's amazing how something like that could, like, especially in those days, could really translate to, him then playing it, I guess, on the TV show, which...
Well, he said he had to play it 3 more times that night. He said, so in my brain, he says, I scheduled it for Monday on Bandstand.
Yeah, yeah.
So Monday he played it on Bandstand.
And then how quickly after that, when it goes on Bandstand, do people request it and recognize that as a song that's...
Well, it takes usually about, after you start playing a record nationally, it takes about 6 weeks to start working its way into the charts and up the charts.
Yeah, and then all the DJs are spinning it.
So by August, it was in the top 20, and on some charts, it was in the top 10.
Wow.
In August and September, and it was, just for the July and August and September.
Yeah.
It was huge. It was, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing it. It was played constantly, and it was selling like...
And so the tour that you were doing at the time, the touring you were doing, was it on a package kind of thing where there was a bunch of artists? And
I was just working clubs at the time, I think. Mostly are one-nighters and record hops and stuff. Not much. Did a show in Michigan with a bunch of people, Sil Austin and Eddie Cochran. And
wow.
I got a picture with everybody. I forgot who all was there now. Dick Clark was there.
Yeah.
And
what was the effect for you as a touring musician, having a record become that big that quickly?
Well, it was good. People knew who I was. They paid to see me.
Yeah.
They paid to come and see if I looked as bad as I played. And so it was pretty exciting. But at the same time, what happened in Florida though? I didn't know if I'd ever have another hit. Rebel Rouser's top 10.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to follow that up, I bet. That's...
Yeah, but, we go down to Florida, and Dick says, he said, we'd like to open the show with something live. Mm-hmm. Would you play Moving and Grooving for the opening? And I said, well, the sound, will be... He said, yeah, we can get it good enough. He said, the idea,
Right.
I said, oh, sure, I'll do it. He says, he came back about 10 minutes later. He said, you got anything you could do for a closer?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I got a song we were working on. I guess I could I could make a little arrangement of it, and we could play it, which was... Anyway, we did that. It's called Ramrod. It was a rocking thing, you know. The sax would come in and rock and everything, and then... And we closed the show with that, and went home, went on, didn't think anything about it.
Yeah.
Went on up to Virginia Beach to do a week in a club, and Dick introduced me to this manager, and he said, well, you need to be working to pay for all this traveling and stuff. He says, how are you paying for it? I said, getting advances from the record company, they're give me a few $100s in those days.
Right.
A few $100s take you a long way.
Yeah.
Took us all down there, paid for a hotel and gas and everything and food. Anyway, we were up in Virginia Beach, and the next Monday, 2 days later, and I get a panicked phone call from the manager. He says, that record, that thing you played, the Ramrod, was
the one
it?
that's not a record, yeah?
Yeah, this is, did you cut that yet? I said, well, we cut a track. He says, well, can you finish it up? And I says, I don't think so, no. I said, I'd probably have to go back. I said, I probably even might have to recut it, And, we got a track, and but that's all we had with drums, bass, and rhythm guitar, and me.
Yeah.
And didn't even, the breaks were, we didn't even know.
It wasn't done.
Yeah, we did. Now we do the breaks like, or we did it. But when I first did it, I did.
Oh, weird. Okay, so it's
like that,
different.
because we didn't know what to do. We were just fooling with it, and then Lee said, "Well, that's good enough. That'll work." So we left it that way, and then we never did anything because he didn't have enough money to do a B-side
to finish it. Okay.
So I said, well, why is it so important to do this? And they said, well, Jamie's got orders for 150,000 records on their desk Monday morning.
How did people know the name of it even?
They just wanted that record that I played on Saturday night.
Right.
Well, I think Dick told them it was Ramrod.
Okay.
Some of them knew, some of them didn't, but they wanted that song we played on Dick Clark.
Right.
And they wanted that record, so.
Wow. Well, that's enough to inspire a session.
Yeah, 150,000. And that's just one hearing, and bad one at that.
Wow.
And so I called Lee, and he says, this is still Monday.
Yeah.
And he says, well, I saw what you did. He says, I can splice and dice, and he says, I'll get Plas on it and the sharps. And he says, I saw what you did, and he says, I can put the record together.
Based off of what you'd already done?
Yeah.
So you didn't recut it?
No.
Okay.
I just did it. We had a couple of different versions, luckily. So I had the part where I did the, and then whatever else he put in, I think, and had all that. So it was easy. He just wove in the sax to it.
Right.
And
that was Plas Johnson on sax?
I did and the sharps would go, whoop, 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 yelling. So it's pretty exciting,
Yeah.
And they did all that, and Plas did his part. And, and Lee took it in, did that.
How quickly did
Monday
you turn
after,
that all around?
I think he set the session up and did it Monday night.
Wow.
Or Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
And a Gold Star.
Yeah.
And mixed it Tuesday afternoon, and mastered it Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
And then they shipped it over to the pressing plant Wednesday morning and started pressing.
Yeah.
And then they started pressing all day Wednesday and Wednesday night, because they go 24 hours.
Right.
Pressing plants in those days. Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, they shipped it. And Friday it was in the record store.
No
less than
way.
A week after.
That's amazing.
Less than a week after we played it on.
That's crazy.
Well, I know it was nuts.
And you had you didn't even have to set foot in the studio again, like you'd already done it.
No.
Wow.
No, Lee did all that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Anyway, I started to tell you earlier, because Lee said, like a few years ago, he said, sorry I put my name on your melody, the Rebel Rouser, you know. He said, that wasn't a nice thing to do. And I said, au contraire. I said, Rebel Rouser would have been just a little melody with maybe some sax answers, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I said, but what you did to it, Lee, was like made it, changed it, gave it a whole new life.
That's the
arrangement. I said that was more than
bands and collaborations.
I said it was worth more than worth half the song.
Yeah,
I have no regrets about that. I said, you earned it. And
That's good. Yeah.
You earned half that song.
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, okay, thank you.
All right. Because he didn't want to pay you back.
No, he said, I'll take it then. And I said, no, you don't have to apologize for stealing my song.
Well, that's very honorable.
Putting your name on my melody. I says, all I did was write the melody, figure out the arrangement, but I said, all that other stuff, I didn't think of putting the Sharps.
Right.
Sharps later became the Rivingtons.
Oh, okay.
They had a record called Papa Ooh Mow Mow.
Yeah, they sure did. Was Plaz Johnson playing? Did he always do the sax stuff on all those tracks?
No. He did Moving and Grooving, and then Gil Bernal did
okay.
Rebel Rouser.
Yeah.
Plaz again on Ramrod.
Right.
And then I did Cannonball.
Oh, yeah, right.
But by this time I had Steve Douglas, so
okay.
That was another emergency. I had to fly back for that because
why?
We had cut when we did Rebel Rouser. We did about 4 songs. I think The Walker, which ended up as a B-side, it was a nothing thing.
They didn't want Lonely One as a B-side?
We were saving that for a single. In fact, that was going to be, after Ramrod, that was going to be the 3rd single.
Okay.
Mason-Dixon Line, I think.
Uh-huh.
Which Lee wanted for a single, and that's the first disagreement we had.
Oh.
Because he said, we'll put Mason-Dixon Lion, and he had Lion's Roar from the MGM thing to open it up with.
Yeah.
And it was
well, you must have been gathering some confidence too, like with
having
all that
but
success.
I knew one mistake. I saw him do it with Sanford.
Right.
Because after The Fool, he followed it up with The Cheat.
Yeah.
And it was The Fool Sideways. Well, this Mason-Dixon Lion was Rebel Rouser Sideways.
Right.
And I said, that's the kiss of death, Lee. I want something different, know. So we decided to go with The Lonely One.
Okay.
We took it back. The manager and Dick Clark, neither one of them liked it. This was on a Thursday.
Yeah.
And we're in New York City.
Yeah.
So they said, they said, oh, no. You don't want to follow up Ramrod with this. I thought, well, why not? It's perfect pacing.
Yeah.
Nice. So forth. Yeah. Anyway, I thought that
but they didn't go for it.
No, they didn't want to do it. They said, you need to cut something else. And I said, oh, for God's sake. So I said, well, let me call Lee. So I called Lee and I said, who happened to be in Phoenix. And I said, they want me to do something else. I said, they don't want to go with Lonely One. And I was supposed to do the Saturday night show for 62.3 million people.
Right.
And introduced the new record. And he says, I don't have any. He says, you got anything? I said, well, I got a thing I've been working on. I says, He says, well, can you get back here? And I said, yeah, I suppose Steve and I could fly back tonight and cut it tomorrow and then fly back and do it Saturday.
Uh-huh.
We were young then. And we didn't have jets in those days. We flew back. It'd take us, we went out to Idlewild, which is now JFK. Got on a DC-6 and flew to Phoenix all night long, Wow. 4 propellers going around, and we were going about 250 miles an hour, whatever it was.
Yeah.
You could look down, and I could see little towns down there and couples in front of the Dairy Queen kids, doing what I'd been doing.
Different times.
A couple of years before, and I watched them as we went by, and probably in Ohio somewhere.
Yeah.
And anyway, we flew all night and fell asleep finally, and got there at 6 a.m, went to my house, cleaned up, had breakfast, went to the studio. Mm-hmm. We started working on this song. And
which song was this?
Cannonball.
Oh, Cannonball, right, okay. Yeah.
Steve was there so he could have the sax part.
Right.
And we had one yell. One guy, the guitar player, went, woo, when we modulated.
Yeah, you almost had like a little formula going down at this time, I guess. As far as like,
kind of, yeah. And we had about 4 rhythm guitar players, and we did some percussion.
In the studio live?
Oh, yeah, always.
4 players?
Always, yeah.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah. And 2 basses. We had a click bass, which was the Fender, because Buddy Wheeler, who invented those amps, made himself a bass amp with 2 JBL bass speakers and a tweeter.
Yeah.
So he didn't get a lot of tone out of the Fender bass. He had one of the first Fender basses, first one in Phoenix anyway. And he plugged into that amp, which was this big. He made it out his own cabinet and everything. Yeah. And the 2 15-inch JBL bass speakers and a tweeter, and he'd go.
With a pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just was a real clicky thing.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people picked up and used on Danos later.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Owen Bradley and
that
Harold
became
Bradley,
a real thing.
I mean,
And they did it in California too with
Bill
Carol
Pittman.
Kay and those people.
No, Bill Pittman did it out there.
Okay.
She may have done it once or twice, but Bill Pittman did every session.
Okay.
With a Dano.
And then another bass player, like an upright
and then
player?
You have an upright player,
To get more of the tone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys kind of copied that out in Phoenix. Like you had 2 bass players, you had a bunch of rhythm guitar players.
Yeah, no, we did it in Phoenix first. We hadn't been to LA.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't do it in LA yet.
Oh, okay. So this was a sound. This was your guys' thing.
There was a guy that came into our session several times, and he saw this, and he thought, they already got 4 or 5 guitar, and we had the guitar players because we only had the 3. And even the 4-track, the equipment we had in the studio, you needed the 3 guitar acoustic rhythms to hear, actually to hear one.
So playing identical?
Yeah.
They were all...
They're doing that, and but all 3 of them, finally I got powerful enough to where you could hear it.
Strictly out of volume or just like the frequencies of the...
Just... frequencies. Some frequencies didn't record well.
So it would be you playing, and then you'd have 3 guys sitting there playing
playing rhythm.
No kidding.
Yeah. Acoustic rhythm.
All on acoustic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Donnie Owens, Al Casey, and Corky Casey.
And that's on all those songs. Like
Corky Casey Odell, I should say, who was the first girl to play rock and roll. She was the first side chick. Rock and roll. Yeah. And because there weren't any in LA or New York.
Right.
They had a girl, Velma Smith, down here that played on country records with them. Corky did all the rock and roll stuff. She did Endless Sleep with Jody Reynolds. Okay. She did The Fool with Sanford Clark. She did all my stuff.
Okay.
Rebel Rouser, Ramrod.
Yeah. So you guys really developed that sound, and I mean that's like what the Wrecking Crew kind of like thrived on after
well, there was
that.
this little kid that came over there, and he saw this, and he said, "Oh, 4 guitars, 2 basses. I bet it'd be really good if you had 3 basses and 2 or 3 pianos." Right. His name was Phil Spector.
Yeah.
And he made friends. He was hanging around Lee's office in Lester, and he became friends.
Yeah.
Really close. And when Lee and Les broke up a couple of years later, Phil Spector and Lester Sills started a label called Phyllis.
Yeah.
Records.
So do you remember Phil like hanging out out in Phoenix?
Yeah.
No kidding.
And he was just a sweet kid, Yeah. And he flew over, and he'd sit in the back of the...
Just watching.
Just watching.
Out. Yeah.
And I hardly ever talked to him, just a little. He was very shy.
Yeah.
And I talked to him sometime about the song or something, and then he'd just get quiet, and we'd wander off, Right. Lee and him talked a little more, but Les and him, Lester was around, so they hung a lot. And then he did the thing called the Teddy Bears, which was Marshall Lee wrote it, who also wrote a great song for me later on called Long Lonely Nights of Winter that I did with Marty Page, arranging a big 34-piece orchestra.
Ooh, nice.
RCA.
Yeah. Did you ever go out to LA and work in the session scene out there?
Well, in 1960, we left Phoenix and went to LA.
Yeah.
And set up a session because I was doing a theme for a movie for Dick Clark.
Right.
Called Because They're Young.
Yes.
And so we went in and we cut 2 records, 2 sides. And I got there at the session, it was at United B on Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
And the first guy I saw was Howard Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
A jazz guitar player
that's great.
who I knew because he was from Phoenix and I'd met him
he was
around somewhere.
Yeah.
And big hellos and everything. He says, I want you to meet a friend of mine. So he takes me over, and this funny dressed guy's sitting there tuning his guitar, and he says, Duane, I want you to meet Barney Kessel.
Oh, nice.
I said, oh my God.
And you knew who
I
Barney
started to
was?
shake hands. I pulled my hand back, and I said, what are you doing here? He says, trying to earn a living. And I'm sorry. And I shook hands with him. And then I found out that Shelly Manne was on drums, who was with Stan Kenton for years, and was the best jazz drummer in America at the time.
Yeah.
It was him on the West Coast and Buddy Rich on the East Coast.
Okay.
Buddy Rich did mostly big band stuff, but Shelly did small jazz, and he could do big band too. But they were the 2 best drummers in America. And there was Shelly Manne, who as a jazz drummer made a great rock and roll record. Drummer.
Yeah.
And
all those early rock and roll guys were
because he knew how to get up. The drummers, the really good ones, know how to play on the beat, under it, and on top of it.
Sure.
And when the last part of it, when we were driving it home, he'd get up on top of it and just just drive the stuffings out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and
who was producing that session?
Lee.
Oh, he came out too.
Yeah, it was early 1960.
Okay.
And then the L.A. Philharmonic came.
Oh, wow.
And they all filed in their suits and ties and everything. They had not worked recording sessions like commercial sessions.
Right.
So they didn't know. They dressed up, properly.
Yeah.
Come in really quiet, tuned up.
Yeah.
Just sat there till we started running it down.
Okay. So you actually played with the
we did it live,
orchestra.
all live. You didn't overdub things like that. In those
Right.
days. We did it live in the studio. We did that and another thing, a 6/8 jazz waltz called Theme for Moon Children. And Because They're Young was the biggest record I ever had. I mean, it got higher in the top 10 than Rebel Rouser.
That was the soundtrack session?
We did that separately.
Oh, okay.
With a little guy named, was just starting out, named Johnny Williams.
Really? So did he do the arrangements on those?
Well, on the score, on the track, on the movie.
For the movie. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had to go to the Columbia Sound Stage and I played it again. But
so that must have been one of his first movies.
It was his first, number one. Johnny Williams.
Little Johnny
they called
Williams.
him. Little Johnny Williams. No, he wasn't little, but he was.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and then he became John Williams, who
Right.
is a monster.
One other album I wanted to ask you about was Twang a Country Song, because I was curious about your relationship with Buddy Emmons. I play some steel, and I've always dug that record too.
I came to town in 1962. I had to do a Dance with the Guitar Man because I'd had a big hit with that year.
Right.
And
who sang on that song, by the way?
The Blossoms.
The Blossoms. Okay.
Darlene Love.
Yeah. Right.
And her girlfriends. So we needed an album to go with the hit. And I wanted to do it in Nashville.
Right. Had you worked in Nashville before?
Only to overdub something.
Okay.
One time in 1960. I came down, met Hank Garland. Well, I'd met him in 59, so I visited him and hung out with him and went to a session with him and went out to his house. He showed me how to play Sugarfoot Rag,
Nice.
He said, which I couldn't get the hang of. And he says, I know it's tricky. He says, I wrote it as an exercise. And then it became a song. And I said, oh, that's wild.
Well, that's probably not the only
So
time
he
that's
showed me
happened.
how he did it. And I recorded it later.
Yeah, you've
on
recorded that song, right?
in that album we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, because I said I wanted to do a country album, and I said with steel guitar.
Yeah.
Who do you want on steel? I says, well, I'd kind of like either Jimmy Day or Buddy Emmons.
Yeah.
And I was hoping I'd get Buddy Emmons, you know, but I didn't think maybe I couldn't.
You didn't know him at that point?
No.
Okay.
Never met him. I figured I probably couldn't get him. He was too big in this world for me, you know, coming from outside.
Yeah.
And
he was probably thrilled to get asked to play with you.
well, we've talked about it a lot since, because spent a lot of time with him the last few years.
Uh-huh.
And we go out and have lunch every other week or two.
Oh, yeah?
So, but back in '62, he showed up and he had a little bottle of bourbon or something, Jack Daniels. He's just a pint.
Yeah.
He sat down there by his steel.
Uh-huh.
He saw Lee looking at it, and he says, his only buddy could laugh. He says, don't pay any attention to that. He says, that's just a little false courage, he says. He told me later, he says, Duane Eddy, he says, I couldn't figure out what can I do? What can I add to this?
Right, yeah.
And he says, then I saw a partial song list, and I realized, well, maybe I'll be all right with this after all.
I think so, yeah.
You know?
So did the whole group kind of fall in together really easily? Because it sounds like a really kind of
I had the
relaxed
best people. I mean, they just knocked themselves out. They just threw out the red carpet. I mean, I had Anita Kerr and the Jordanaires.
Oh, Jordanaires.
Because I was used to having 12 singers on my records.
Yeah.
And down here, they only put 4 on.
Right.
Either the Jordanaires or
Jordanaires were on
Anita
everything.
Kerr
Uh-huh.
and her 3 people.
Yeah.
I said, I want both. Can I get both? Well, sure.
Nice.
You know,
Do you remember what studio you were in for that?
Studio B.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember right where I was and right where Buddy sat. And,
You guys all did it live, pretty much.
together. Floyd
yeah.
was over there, Floyd Kramer.
Yeah.
And Buddy Harmon on drums on the riser. And
Nice. Would you guys have amps and stuff in the room with you, or were they like all isolated?
Yeah, we were all
the
there.
whole thing was all in there.
Anita
Nice.
and the Jordanaires were on their mics over in the corner.
Yeah. Baffled
There's
at all,
a back
or-
door.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had some baffles here and there, but I could see them kind of. And then the drums and the bass up there and rhythm.
Yeah.
Hank Garland, I hired him, even though he wasn't. The one day I hired him for the session because his wife thought, I checked with her, she thought it might be good for him. He had a car accident and he couldn't play anymore.
Oh, really? Okay.
No. And,
So you brought him in on the session.
but he could play a little rhythm.
Uh-huh.
So I brought him in on that. And what they did after the accident, everybody still put him on their sessions.
Just because he was Hank Garland.
So he could continue making his house payments, or she could,
Yeah.
and pay his medical bills. And
Yeah.
he had to have shock treatments and everything. His brain, he had a telephone pole with his head.
Oh, man.
And Chet and Johnny Smith, the jazz guitar player, took him in. They'd been doing some stuff with Don Gibson, and I think it was Hank and Johnny and Chet and Don. And Girls, Guitars, and Gibsons was the album. So Chet and Johnny took him in the studio and handed him a guitar, just the 3 of them.
Yeah.
And they started just playing. Johnny playing, and Chet's playing. And then they say, okay, Hank. And
Oh, wow.
he just couldn't play.
Yeah.
He could play.
Oh, really? So he had
He
some
could play a little
facility.
rhythm.
Yeah.
He played on Shook Rag.
He did, eh?
Yeah.
Playing acoustic guitar? Or?
Acoustic rhythm.
Yeah.
And people have called me a liar, said, no, you didn't. And I said, well, yes, I did. He actually played it, and I watched him.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
you
I
would
was
know.
watching to see if everybody in the booth, Lee was aware of it, and Bill Porter, the engineer, was aware,
Right.
of course. And they're listening. They figured, well, if he hits bad notes, we'll just turn his pot down,
Yeah.
turn his mic off.
Yeah.
And because we had somebody else
Playing as well.
playing
Oh,
rhythm. Yeah. But
that's
after
the
the
way it
first
went
session, he wandered off somewhere.
Oh,
And they found him just heading out the front door.
really?
And he didn't know where he was going or what he
Oh,
was
man.
doing. He sat in the lobby for a while, and then he got up and started out the front door. So and he was getting a little agitated. So his wife said, well, I better take him home.
Yeah.
So everybody did that here because they
You got to look after him.
gotta look after your
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
And,
So how many, was that a fairly quick album? Like you did it in a few days?
yeah,
or whatever?
just I think in a week, a few
Yeah.
days. We did about 2 songs a session.
Yeah.
Sometimes 3.
That's a great record.
Because they're so good, those guys. I
Yeah.
mean, you just run it down. And
Yeah.
I sat there one time, I was doing Weary Blues from Waiting, Hank Williams.
Sure. That's got that great Buddy Emmons solo on it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I messed up the great one you never hear.
Oh, really?
No, he did the same thing and did it just the same way.
Uh-huh.
God bless him for doing that because I messed up. I'm sitting there and he's grinning at me. I didn't realize at the time, he put that grin on when he was on stage and everything.
Uh-huh.
He wasn't really grinning at anybody. He learned how to do that, and he's looking inside his head at what he's playing.
Okay.
That's what he was doing with me, but I thought he was grinning at me, so I'm grinning back at him. And I'm listening to what he's playing, and I'll just stop grinning. I'm just thinking, oh, that's the most beautiful thing I ever heard.
Yeah.
And then everybody stopped. And I looked in at Lee and said, what the heck happened? And I looked around the room and said, what happened? And Anita finally detached from the group and walked over to me.
Yeah.
And nobody else wanted to say anything.
Yeah.
And because they knew how embarrassed I'd be, but she was bolder. So she walked over and she said, well, Duane, I believe you were supposed to come in there.
Really? So
my God, I turned as red as my Gretsch, and I was, after I was supposed to come in.
It's hard
And
to
I
follow
didn't.
Buddy Emmons.
I just didn't come in. I just sit there smiling and
That's wicked, man.
Oh gosh, that's so beautiful. So I apologized to everybody and
I'm sure they
apologized to
forgave you.
Buddy, and I said, I hope you can do something half-act good. He says, I believe I'll get through it.
Sure enough.
Of course he did. I didn't have that in Hollywood. I mean, they just said, yeah, we can do that. Or,
Right.
yeah,
Different.
we'll give it a shot.
Different vibe
but,
here for sure.
But here, well, I'll try. So polite,
Yeah.
And I'd say, I'd ask Anita, can we do this or that? And she said, well, we'll try. If you play anything from the country album,
Yeah.
you try to play Fireball Mail because Buddy did
Okay.
an amazing solo in it. Outstanding and amazing. He had a new thing that he'd just gotten a few months before, I think, or a year before.
Okay.
And he used that on it, and it just sounds like a cascade of sound. And that album has become a Bible for steel players.
Yeah. It's
Not
incredible.
because of anything I did, but because I just played my usual stuff and basically set Buddy up,
Right.
So
But
he
it's an unmistakably Duane Eddy record.
Oh
It's
yeah,
amazing,
sure
man.
it is.
Sounds
But
great.
it's like on Peace in the Valley. I was thinking, how am I going to arrange this?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's supposed to be my record, but
Well, it works so well. Yeah.
but I thought, well, if I do that, then what's Buddy going to play?
Yeah,
'Cause
you don't
I
have to
can't-
worry about that guy.
How am I going to come in and finish it up?
Right.
Anyway, he was just gorgeous, and
Yeah.
he played the first thing, and then after we went through it once, then I came in and played,
Yeah.
My
It works
part.
really well.
which I'd done many times. I learned a long time ago it's just as easy to feature the other guys.
Right.
It's still my record,
Yeah. Of course.
but if they star on it, that's good.
It's good for everybody.
It's good for
Yeah.
everybody.
I'm curious to know if you're planning on doing any more recordings or anything these days, or
Well, I'll tell you what, Steve Warner and I was writing yesterday,
oh yeah,
and we're going to do a track together later
cool.
this month on
Yeah.
his album.
okay,
I don't know what it's going to be yet. We might write one more, we may not.
Yeah.
We wrote two, and
instrumentals or songs?
yeah,
or-
instrumentals.
Oh, great.
I would like something to where I did kind of like what I did with Buddy, just
Yeah,
where I would play something for a while, and
Yeah.
then he'd come in and just blast off,
Right. yeah,
and do his thing
yeah,
instead of playing with me just to be featured and just. But we don't have the thing we got isn't quite like that. I mean, it
Okay.
is.
Right.
He will be on the bridge. He'll do some
Yeah.
great things, but I mean, whatever he does is
Do you
beautiful.
think he'll do another like Duane Eddy record ever?
I hope so. I think so.
Oh, good.
I've got a few tracks that are waiting to be. I just need to get the budget to pay the musicians master scale
Right.
and to finish mixing and mastering.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got one that Phil Everly and I wrote.
Really?
It's just gorgeous. He sings his head off on that, and
Uh huh.
he harmonized with himself, so it sounds like the Everly Brothers.
Oh, beautiful.
I played with Mandy Barnett at inducting Grady Martin.
Oh, into the Country Music
into
Hall
the
of Fame.
Country Music Hall of Fame. And, you know, he came up with the fuzz tone on the Marty Robbins record, Don't Worry.
Yeah.
Well, she sang it and I played the fuzz. I got to be Grady Martin for a day.
Nice. Were you really into that record as a kid?
Huh?
Were you really into that record when it came out? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge record. And that was definitely like, that was a real innovation guitar wise.
He was a monster. He's an amazing guitar player. And I mean, those are classic things, that and then the fuzz tone.
Yeah, that's huge.
And then I was doing his stuff back when I was working with the country band. Mm-hmm. I'm a honky tonk man.
Oh, is that him too? Yeah.
That was what influenced me, was things like that. And
were you into like blues players and stuff as well?
No, I didn't hear blues until I was about 18, 19.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was mostly country.
I just listened to country stations, and I just never ran across it. But then I got out there with those, with the Sharps, and they took me down to Watts. And
where was that?
It's the black section of L.A.
Yeah.
But in those days, you could go there. And I mean, it was still the black section, but I went down to the KGFJ, Charles Trammell. And he played blues things. He played Moving and Grooving.
Yeah.
And I did they took me down so I could do an interview.
Okay.
Went down there like at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
We went in this part of L.A. I'd never been, of course. And we turned off and we came out in this square, drove around the square, and parked right in front of the radio station. Could see the guy sitting in the window talking on the mic. We went in there, did the interview, which I was very bad at, but he says, "You'll get used to it." He says, I have a feeling you'll be doing a lot more of these.
Yeah. And
he was really sweet, Charles was. And the guys, they were there. They helped me. They clowned around and did a lot of talking and, you know. And then we're going to do this and blah, blah, blah. So they kind of, maybe we'll take Duane with us. I don't know, you know. And so after that, we went down to the 5-4 ballroom. Now, that's a big ballroom down there that's just for dancing, you know.
Yeah.
But they had a full-sized orchestra like in the 40s.
Okay.
With horn sections. They had a girl singer and a guy singer, like they used to be Frank Sinatra and Doris Day or somebody.
Yeah.
But this was just a, you know, I don't know who they were, but he was good and she was good. They're both black. Everybody was black in the orchestra and in the audience as well.
Yeah.
But I was with my buds. I didn't even think about standing out.
Right.
And we've been drinking some Thunderbird wine on the way, and I was starting to feel pretty good. But anyway, they got up there, and they're three guitar players, and they're taking turns with their solos, you know. And they set me up there amongst them, and the guys brought my guitar and amp in from the trunk. And, so I just plugged in, and I sat there, and finally the band director pointed at me, and I shook my head. No.
Really?
I don't know this stuff.
Did they know who you were?
Oh, yeah.
They did?
Well, no, not really. And but they knew the Sharps and the Sharps. And they
the Sharps vouched for you.
I guess the band leader had heard Moving and Grooving.
Right,
And,
okay.
And they told me a fib. They said, he wants you to come up and play Moving and Grooving. Well, they never asked me to play Moving and Grooving because they didn't have an arrangement on it, and they didn't know it, you know. But they just did do these blues.
Yeah.
You know, they do things like that, and they had the horn section. So I took my solo, and I went, and I'd just been listening, following those guys. I never done anything with 3 chords like that except country.
Really,
you know?
just had never.
Yeah, never. But I noticed they were doing like.
Sure. It's like a whole different vocabulary.
Minor things, you know,
right.
rather than the major. You know?
Yeah.
And they'd go where a country guy goes.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, I did my solo, and then I come toward the end of it, and I started, you know, it felt so darn good, you know, the drummer and everything.
Yeah. Probably a great band.
Yeah, so they were a great band, and I got to my last part. And the horns went, bam, and I went, whoa, that's interesting. Ba-dum, bum, bum, bum.
Right, so you had a little dialogue going there. Yeah.
They just had an answer thing, and I went. And then they go, they did it with me.
Sure.
Da, da, da.
Yeah.
Da, da, da. Da, da, da. You know, and it just went from there. And and I got through, and the band leader does a circular motion with his finger. You know, I go around again. And when I had no, he says, and he did it harder. Right. So I did another one. And by that, I didn't care about it.
You can't say no, man.
I was just having so much fun. So I went ahead and just laid into it. And that's when I really learned to play the blues.
That was your first blues experience there. Wow.
Right there.
Throw you to the wolves. That's great.
Yeah. Well, it's like learning to swim by throwing you in the pool, you know?
Well, it's nothing technically different from what you were doing. It's just a different vocabulary and different way of, like different harmonically, it's like a different approach, but it's the same stuff in a way, really.
Well said. Yeah, I call them mystery chords. I was running around with Lester Sill one day, and down on Melrose Boulevard, he was running some errands. So I said, I'll go with you. I'll drive you. So I drove him around. And so we parked. We go in the studio, and he drops off the demos to somebody. There's a blues singer in there. Anyway, he was just playing some great stuff and singing and everything. And it was all dark. I couldn't hardly see anybody. And they liked it that way they're doing blues. You know? Sure. Why not have to keep the lights down?
Yeah, man. You got to have the right lighting for it.
But Lester does his business, and he says, okay, we're ready. Let's go. And get out in the street, and I says, who was that in there? He says, oh, it's a young guy named B.B. King.
No way.
This is like 1957, I think. I did a show with him in Oakland. I didn't know it.
Really?
Well, I didn't know it until afterward, because we came rearing in from somewhere up north, and just barely in time to
hopped on stage
to load in and tune up and plug in and get our stuff on stage and do our show. And you know, it all went smoothly, and we were on time. Yeah, but we didn't have any extra time.
Right.
So I didn't even check to see who was on the show. It turned out it was James Brown, who I ran into, and but I didn't know who was there. And I'm back after I get through. I did my show. Oh, I found out years later there was a group. It was a bunch of guys that were right in the front row. I remember seeing them sitting there because they're all gazing at me, you know, and watching me. And they're kind of, you know, excited about it, and I can tell. But I didn't think anything about it until later on, years later, they told me, I met John Fogerty. He says, well, that was me and the Creedence Clearwater. We had the 5 center front row seats.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, he's clearly a big disciple of yours, I would say. He
said, at one time, he said about 60% of their songbook that they did in clubs and stuff was my stuff. You know?
Yeah, man.
Anyway, after the show, I'm putting my guitar away, and a guy walks in the dressing room. I turn around, and there's a nicely dressed, well-dressed black man. And he walks up to me, and he says, Duane, I love those blues. And 330 blues. I always play the 330 blues and show, you know, to pace it, you know. And try to do a ballad in the blues, and then plus all the up-tempo rock stuff. And so I said, well, thank you very much. He says, I liked it so much, I got to give you a hug. So he throws his arms around me and just pins me, and Eddie's hugging me real hard. And he says, I liked it so much, I'm going to kiss you on the cheek. And he gives me a kiss on the cheek. And then he steps back and lets me go, and he says, I'm sorry. He said, I didn't introduce myself, did I? He says, I'm B.B. King. And I said, oh, my goodness. I said, now it's my turn to give you a hug and a kiss on the cheek, which I proceeded to do.
Yeah.
So we talked for quite a while. And then I saw him again at the Hollywood Bowl, and it was just so sweet.
He seems like would have been a nice.
And he
nice
always
man.
thought I was really a good guitar player. He kept telling me that.
Yeah, I can see how you would appeal
such
to him.
Such a good guitar player, Duane. Because he liked the blues,
Right.
I mean, of course, but I mean, he liked what I did with it. And
I bet he was really into country music and obviously a lot of early rock.
He was
and stuff
really
too.
into it. I said one day in '58, I said to Chuck Berry, I said, Chuck, who do you listen to? I says, that's your favorite. He says, Kitty Wells and the Everly Brothers.
Right on. Yeah.
I says, really? He
Yeah.
says, oh yeah, I'm a country boy. He says, I grew up listening to country stations. He says, of course I heard the blues because that was part of my...
Yeah, apparently Charlie Parker was really into Hank Williams,
Okay.
Thanks so much,
You
man.
can put this back.
Yeah. Really
thank
appreciate you coming down.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, everybody. Music Makers and Soul Shakers podcast is produced at the Hen House Studio in East Nashville, Tennessee. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find more info on this episode, including show notes and an audio playlist for Spotify and Apple Music at makersandShakerspodcast.com. Thank you again to our sponsors this season, Union Tube and Transistor, Spectra in 1964, the Deering Banjo Company, Mule Resonator Guitars, and the Hen House Hang. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another chilling episode of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. Over and out.